that he could probably stay at United now, but you never know in football. I mean, I raised another spectre to him about where he might go and who he might play with, and he gives a fascinating answer. So I think people should watch the interview, and there'll be, well, a few jaws will be dropping, I can tell you that, quite regularly.
Interesting. All right, Piers, as always, lovely to have you on. Thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Good luck with how it goes.
Take care, guys.
See you later. You can watch Cristiano Ronaldo's World exclusive on Piers Morgan Uncensored on Talk TV in a two-part special on Wednesday and Thursday. This week, both of those 8 p.m. Channel numbers are Sky 526, Freeview 236, Virgin 606, or you can also download the app. And as Piers says there's a lot that hasn't been seen. So it will be very, very interesting. I imagine it's going to make headlines for about another few weeks. So what time is it now? It's 9:25.
Talk Sport Breakfast with Laura Woods. Monday to Wednesday morning, 6 till 10. On AM, on DAB, via the Talk Sport app and on your smart speaker. Talk Sport.
Okay, so I'm ready to hit this. Listen to your body, feel your power to fit it.
You can run a variety of arguments. You can say, don't do as I do, do as I say. You can run the argument, if you can't beat them, join them. Or you can run the argument that Gary Neville might have the courage of his convictions and say the very things that he's saying for other broadcasters that give him an opportunity to advance his point because it carries favour with them, and say the same thing while he's doing it on Beyond's platform. When he doesn't say that, then we can land him with the prize tag of the biggest hypocrite that we have recently seen, and that's a long list of people that would fit that particular bill. He is a hypocrite. He talks about controls in football and brings Peter Lim over to run Salford and break salary management protocols. He is a hypocrite. He talks about, the players needing to understand reset in football whilst potentially advising the PFA that there should be no pay cuts to the players. He's a hypocrite. He talks about fans having to behave themselves whilst advocating for fans to mobilise and do things like they do at Manchester United. I am not for this World Cup. I'm also not for the West preaching to the Middle East. So whilst I'm not for this World Cup, we're going to go over there and we're going to broadcast shows from there. Does that make me a hypocrite because I'm not for something and I've said things about it? I've also balanced it up by saying it's not our people to lecture other people in the world how they should operate in their societies because our Western values are different to theirs. Gary talks a lot of sense about a lot of things and a lot of nonsense about some other things. And in this instance, of course he's going to be called a hypocrite because you know what you have to do when you want to advance a cause and you want to be at the front of the queue for doing so, you have to invest some self-sacrifice in that. And no one wants to. Hummel don't want to. Sainsbury's don't want to when they're advertising the fact that we love pride while selling products to Saudi Arabian stores, which are probably one of the most discriminatory countries in the world towards LGBT issues. And Gary Neville doesn't want to. So let's stop with the lecture. Let's stop with the virtue signalling and just get on with the fact you're the same as everybody else. You have different views, they are conflicted at times, and what your primary view is, what am I in the business of? I'm in the business of Gary Neville. There's nothing wrong. I admire people that put their head above the parapet. Yeah. Gary has views. Yeah. So whether these views are challengeable, he doesn't get challenged at Sky. Someone sent him a memo saying what Gary Neville says is unchallengeable. I happen to think a lot of it is absolute poppycock and needs to be debated.
So on this one, you think he should have sat at home?
I think if you want to have strong views and you want to spout those views with strong views, you can't then do it by then saying, well, I'll pop those views because I'm going to get a big bag of money. First of all, during the summer, you said that clearly they haven't had a conversation, and that if you were the manager of Manchester United, you'd have flown around the world and sat down with Ronaldo. So they didn't have a conversation. So your hypothesis is probably wrong. But hang on, you
think that you've got to this point without Ronaldo meeting the manager?
I'm going to allow you to interrupt me without correcting you.
Well, it makes a change.
Okay.
So
I'm learning, Graham.
It's not the other way around. So you're saying at the start of the season, after Ronaldo making his stand, that I don't want to be here, that there was never a conversation between the manager and the player.
No, I'm saying to you that the narrative that you're peddling out is probably not based upon a great deal of substance. First and foremost, how do you know how many games he's going to play? Because he played 30 last year. So his argument in the league, hang on, that's a different argument, Graham. Stick to the point that you made. The point that you made was about attendances and appearances. He played 30 times in the league last year. So the premise of that he wasn't playing enough could only have come from the fact that Ten Hag have told him you weren't going to be playing. Now hang on, you're saying He played 30 games. Now, whether he featured in them, I don't know how many times he came off the bench and how many times he started. But he played 30 games in the Premier League. He's a grown-up. He's not a stupid imbecile. He knows that there's challenges in front of him. The reasons why he wanted to leave Man United is because Man United, on whole, en masse, is a football club in flux that had been very poor the previous season. And I don't think it was just about not playing. I think it was as much to do with wanting to be away from the mess that Manchester United was becoming. Now you roll forward and you've got this situation now where Ronaldo gave us a wonderful little lecture to listen to during the course of the season, which was all of these young players that don't listen to things. But when he was a player that was growing up at Man United, he listened to the senior pros. Roll that forward now. We've got a guy that smacks a phone out of a kid's hand. We've got a guy that refuses to turn up pre-season training. A guy that walks off and disappears after half-time. A guy that makes it all about himself by giving histrionics on the sidelines, whoever the manager is. All of that backdrop is a load of old BS that shouldn't have to be accepted.
None of that I would condone. Absolutely none of that. But I come back to the conversation he must have had with his manager to clear up the situation which would allow him to remain at Man United.
So the argument then would be that Ten Hag, and I concur with you on this view, has created a problem he didn't need to have.
It's their own making.
When you put a player on against Tottenham when you're winning 2-0 in the 87th minute of Ronaldo standing, what is the point of that exercise? I don't see the point of it. Now, I don't suspect that you can sit there, and that's why I listened to the Gary Neville-Roy Keane debate with an even foot in either camp, because I understood Roy's position to some extent about what Ronaldo was, what he has been, what he can still be, against Neville's position of, hang on a second, the sum of all its parts is greater than the individual. We can't have this toxicity in the dressing room that's allowed to walk down a touchline in front of all and turn it into something about himself. But Ten Hag has created that. And if Graham's hypothesis is right, and I'm not saying it is or isn't, I'm personally not sure that it's right, but I'll bow to the fact that he's done these sort of things as a manager. What would be the point? Why would Ten Hag be this obtuse and circumspect in his thinking that he'd want to create this problem? Everybody that knows the world of football knows that Ronaldo, unless he gets what he wants, is a problem. Ten Hag is the guy that made the decision, because he came straight out of the gate very early in his tenure. The first press conference that he had, when we all sat slightly underwhelmed by it, and he talked about Ronaldo, and he made his position clear he wanted it. Right? That's before he'd even spoken to him, Graham. Before he'd even spoken to him. So here we are now with a situation saying, a manager's been brought in by Man United. He's not only disingenuous to a player that he's not a problem with, he's also stupid. The narrative not being built underneath. Also, Luis Campos is allegedly not very happy there. And he's the one that probably has the axe to grind, because he's been brought in to do a certain job, because he's got a backdrop of being a talent recruiter of some repute. I mean, if we are to believe, and it does beg a belief, that there is an idea that the player will determine who the sporting director of the club is and stuff of that nature, then we are disappearing into the territory of the lunatics running the asylum. The idea that he'd signed a contract until 25, so the issue had been buried, seems to have been uncovered as not quite the case, that the contract gives an option to him at the end of 24 to extend his contract by a year, not to the club. I find it slightly perplexing, because if you look at the power base of this club, Nasser Al-Khelaifi is not a person about influence, it doesn't understand the football game, and doesn't have huge financial reach. So the cost implications of Kylian Mbappe probably fall out of his pocket on the way to a game. And allowing a player to have that sort of outlook and attitude, we are in a territory.
You changed your tune about Al-Khelaifi. You were having a pop at him last week.
Well, I have a pop about the dynamics of how have I changed the tune? We're talking about a specific subject. Do I think that PSG and the influence of that kind of Middle Eastern money is a great thing for football? No, I don't. But that's not the subject we're talking about. We're talking about how you control a player like Kylian Mbappe, and how this player seems to be getting ahead of himself, and how the story seems to be that he's falling out with Neymar, he's falling out with a football club, he doesn't want to play in a certain way, he's happy playing for France, he wasn't happy playing for France the other day because he didn't want to be part of a team photograph, because of different reasons. So you can build the narrative around this player. What we are talking about is sublime talent. What we won't be talking about is him signing for an English Premier League club, because I don't think an English Premier League club will pay 200 million to release him. I just don't think it will happen. And I think that he will probably end up going back to Spain, and then we'll have the ridiculous argument from that nitwit in Spain, Tevez, about how people are breaking football, and the cost implications of it all are being determined by the people whilst his club spend the most money. I don't think that's right. I think Martin Samuel's being selective in the way he interprets information. You can make information, you can manipulate it and represent it in a certain way, and I don't believe that they are 12. Because I did an analysis last year. If you take this season in isolation, absolutely fantastic, undeniable, Jurgen Klopp has got it wrong. Fact trumps sentiment. every time. People don't like that. When he talks to the audience, he said that people won't like to hear what I have to say. Well, they do like what you have to say. They do want to hear it because a significant proportion of football across continents and across clubs in the Premier League believe that there is jeopardy in some of the models that are coming into football. Whether it be Newcastle, whether it be Manchester City, whether it be Paris Saint-Germain. There's nothing xenophobic about it, it's just calling it for what it is. Now then you move into the territory of being a little bit previous, because we don't quite know what Newcastle are going to do. And so with that in mind, we all project they're going to buy the earth, and potentially they're going to do precisely what PSG and Man City have done, and we bow to the knowledge of the Saudis don't come second to anybody else. But
You don't think they will do
but
that?
we will see. I do think they will do it. I do think they'll be very aggressive. But I also think that they're being very structured and sensible in their thinking. And the third part of Jurgen Klopp's analysis makes no sense. If you are governed by financial fair play, you cannot do precisely what you want.
Yeah.
So make your mind up, Jurgen, because on one hand you're saying they can do precisely as they want. On the other hand, you're acknowledging this existence of financial fair play. And then we move into a different territory of conversation, and we look at the dynamics of financial fair play, how much teeth that has had, and how it has been proven to have been gotten around, and how you have heavyweight football clubs that are prepared to say to authorities, we will tie you up in legal red tape like you have never seen before. We will out-legal you. We will out-legal you as a governing body. And you move into those environments, and then we will have a multiple of football clubs.
Right.
And we'll be able to spread our costs and dilute. So when you look at Martin Samuel's observations, they're not on the money. Yes, okay, Man City didn't want the mickey taken out of them for a 29-year-old Harry Kane. Well, yeah, fine. They didn't want to pay 150 or 175 million quid or whatever Daniel thought he could put his hand on the tiller for.
Simon, the comments are on the
Have
money
you got
because of
a
the
pen
league table
in
for
it?
net spend this season.
But that's one.
He's right about
but,
it.
But that's one moment in time, and I absolutely concur.
That's 5 seasons.
No, I don't agree with that.
Liverpool spent more. Net spend was more.
I don't necessarily agree that Man City were. Now there may well be a case, because I did an evaluation last November of the net spend, and Klopp came out higher than lower per point achieved on the basis of the investment they put into place.
Listen, City are fuming because he did what he did before the match. So was the comments that Klopp made, were they inflammatory or realistic?
What's that got to do?
Because it riled up the support.
Okay, so let me get this right. Someone is going to advance the argument that Jurgen Klopp is dealing in the area of half fact and half sentiment and calling it as he thinks he sees it is somehow a defence for a bunch of vile morons to do two things.
I don't think they're not saying it's defence.
Then what's this commentary about? It's a blame game. We started this piece on a blame game, and underneath that blame game is some reason for mitigation, some reason why there was a fire starter. So he did not start an unnecessary, throwing of bricks at the Man City from the Liverpool fans. Unacceptable. No excuse for it. He did not start the methodology behind Man City fans writing and chanting abusive chants about Hillsborough or Heysel or whatever it was. So that's got nothing to do with Klopp. And if you want to give him a pass or give Man City a pass, well, in some way it's a conversation that either has any justification, nonsense. He addressed the subject matter.
Why is it nonsense?
Because it's the elephant in the room. Everybody, you can talk about what Man City have and haven't done, and they have every right, and they've increased their turnover, so they're now at a stage, right, after having bought and paid for a football team that pays £60 million for every fullback it plays, right? They've unloaded Sterling, Zinchenko. If you buy enough players at top-end money, you will eventually be able to sell these players at top-end money. So what they've been able to do is they've been able to get Inga Haaland to involve himself with his son's future, to be able to take a commercial decision about getting Haaland for 51 million quid against the market prices because they're fortuitous. Some will say they didn't want to do it last year. That's fine. Neither did Manchester United want to do Jadon Sancho 115 million quid. They ended up doing it 73 million quid. We can all point to how people have been successful and unsuccessful in transactions in equal measure.
But why do it before they set foot on the pitch to play what was a highly charged fixture anyway?
Why would the media...
Klopp says, I know City will not like it, nobody will like it. You've asked the question, but you know the answer. What does Liverpool do? I know City will not like it, nobody will like it. Well, why say it?
Because in a framework,
He knows what he's doing.
in a framework of he doesn't know what he's doing. If he knew what he was doing, then the outcome would have been able to be projected. And the Man
Did
City
he
fans,
inflame an already inflammatory fixture? Did he inflame it further?
I don't think it's necessary for those observations, but I don't think he's too far away from the truth. So tragically, people don't like the truth. They only like the version of the truth that suits the argument they want. You know what, Man City? You're a wonderful football club. You've got wonderful players. You haven't got around regulations. You haven't been sanctioned. You haven't been brought up in front of governing bodies and fined for breaches of financial fair play. All of that didn't happen. Forget it. And by the way, Liverpool, you aren't hypocrites. You don't spend £85 million on centre forwards when you're accusing other people of having inordinate amounts of money. The whole thing is neck deep in hypocrisy. But that bottom line is, if we are going to, at any moment in this conversation, find some mitigation behind the appalling behaviour of both sets of fans in this context, then both the Man City officials and the Liverpool officials are front foot, not trying to blame the other person. They should be saying it's unacceptable from our respective fan bases, and we're going to deal with that, rather than this BS. This is the same Graham Souness, right, by the way, who had 5 jobs in 5 years. So what do you mean? You left Liverpool.
5 jobs in 5 years.
Galatasaray, Southampton, Torino, Benfica, and Blackburn
So
Rovers.
2 years at Liverpool.
5 years.
Uh,
That's-
three-
but this guy had 2 years in his last job. You didn't factor that into it.
No,
The guy,
no,
yes, he did.
I've
In his
got
last
to
job, he had 2 or
5
3 years.
5 years, 5 jobs. Run them. And I'll give you the truth
Liverpool,
now.
left Liverpool 94, went to Galatasaray
You're gonna have to
95,
be right.
Southampton,
They'll be
Torino,
wrong.
Benfica, Blackburn Rovers.
So let me say,
Between Galatasaray, I just named them. Galatasaray, Southampton, Torino, Benfica,
well, let's add
Blackburn
them.
Rovers.
So it's,
You're
2.5
20 minutes in Torino.
2.5, yeah, six games.
So no one knew the backstory, right?
2 years.
You know the backstory?
That was a Nottingham Forest situation. 2 years at Liverpool, 2.5 years at Liverpool, a year at, which you only started a year contract at Galatasaray. Where else was it? After that?
Southampton,
That was a year.
Benfica, and then
So
Blackburn
that-
Rovers.
so
So you had
that's
5 or
2
6
years.
clubs
So that was
in
2
6
years.
years.
So I
So
know
that's
that
7
you, for
years.
Roberto De Zerbi, I'm reading Graham
Well,
Souness.
absolutely.
So that was 7 years.
Because obviously it would be
And I had
different,
eight-
Graham, because everyone would know that you
I had
who
8
you were.
jobs. I had 8 jobs in, I think, was it 17, 18 years?
Yes, you did.
Your Wikipedia up there.
And I'm Googling you, so I wanted to see the strength of your argument, because what you're doing is you're sort of baiting and switching, and there is a risk of everything. So hang on, I'm finished. What you did,
He's never
what you did
spent
was
more
you
than
went
2
all down
years.
the risk side.
He's
Now
not-
now what you're doing is slightly qualifying it more now by saying
No, the facts, read the facts.
every manager.
How long was I in management?
How long was you managing? You were in management for 18 years, 20 years.
How many jobs did I have?
9.
8, I think, isn't it?
Well, then what you asked me for, if you know them.
So that would
So it's
suggest
2.5
that I
years to
spent.
manager.
That would suggest that I spent. I think I had 5 years at Liverpool, close to 5 years at Blackburn Rovers. So that would suggest that I did have longevity. I had 11 trophies in 3 different
And
countries.
this guy has had in his last 2 jobs, right? They've lasted 5 years. So the first 4 or 5 jobs were very short-term jobs, and
I've
ultimately
always
the
short
last
term
2
was one
jobs.
job in 2 years.
Well, you average 2.5 years per job.
No,
That's what you average.
you can't. That's not the argument.
Well, that's your argument.
I spent 4 years plus at Blackburn Rovers.
Let's get
I
off
spent
you now.
5
That's
years
your
at
favourite
Rangers.
subject. Let's move on to something else.
That's enough about me. Let's talk about me.
The bottom line is that what you did was you categorised the Zerbi with only the
I
risk column.
understand.
Now, hang on, I'm finished. You turned around and put all the debits. You didn't put any credits, right? Your soliloquy was
2 years.
risk. And
And
now,
you went out.
and now what you're saying now is, well, every appointment's a risk.
No,
Well,
I'm
if you
fine
employ
with
you,
it. I
yes.
spent five
jobs,
years,
6 years.
5 years at Rangers, close to 5 years at
Back to you again. We've moved on from you.
because it doesn't suit your argument.
It does
So
suit
it
my
shows that
argument.
I've had longevity in a couple of jobs. This chap has had 7 jobs in 9 years, which would suggest he can't have been anywhere.
And you
too
had
long.
5 jobs in 5 years.
No, it's not. We've
It
gone through
is.
arithmetic.
I've got it here. It
It's
is.
not correct then.
Go
There's
That's
a
right,
there's
that's
a
the
slight
truth.
element of hypocrisy in your argument about De
Massive
Zerbi,
hypocrisy.
is it not?
Boatload of it. Well, look, I mean, it is it's a lesser of all evils to go out and to the media and say something rather than nothing and do it as a faceless statement. It's a preposterous set of observations that he's made because he's defending the indefensible. It's cowardly because he wouldn't come on and answer questions from people like us or go into a press conference where people are going to ask him real joined up questions. Due process, well, you can follow the due process argument if you want. You can produce B samples anytime you want. You can do the things that should be done. There is no question that what was being attempted to be achieved here, these promoters have left a lot to be desired, because there's no question in my mind that what they were seeking to achieve, and let's be clear about why people might have been making observations about high courts and injunctions, because Eddie Hearn told people that it was in the hands of his lawyers. Right? So by definition, Eddie started that hare. He started the dynamic of how people might be perceiving what he's going to be doing. And I would be very surprised if there wasn't discussion about injunctions, if there wasn't discussions about using alternate balls. They may not have come to any fruition. Maybe videos circulating of Eddie Hearn espousing the benefits of the very system that he is seeking to find a way round in terms of VADA testing doesn't help any cases that you might want to bring via your legal team to be able to overcome a failed drugs test. Not overcome an adverse finding, overcome a failed drugs test. So when we're talking about that in its distilled form, how can anybody look at this and say, this is awful? How can they not look at it and say it that way? How can they not look at it and say, whatever way you want to spin this, and you can be very smart to spin it in a way that looks like you're going to sue the board.
Yeah.
You're going to sue the board for upholding the values of the sport. You're going to sue the board for upholding the integrity and principles of a sport. That's what you're going to sue them for, are you?
If the test hadn't been leaked to the media, we'd all be going to the O2 tomorrow night.
Absolutely. And people that would be in the know, people of influence, power, would have allowed this to go on.
Yes.
Whilst lecturing the sport, whilst in Saudi Arabia about how much we can learn from Saudi Arabian boxing and a whole raft of things. People are in this, and there does need to be some proper transparency about how the situation manifests itself. And there does need to be some accountability. And that means the promoters need to explain themselves, the fighter needs to explain himself, the medical teams behind the fighters, because this is a high-profile fight. That's potentially brought the boxing world, with broadcasters involved as well, into disrepute. But it was a ridiculous outburst after the game to allude to the fact that there's collusion and corruption and a focus on achieving something against Tottenham Hotspur is ridiculous. I understand the emotion. I understand the outburst to some extent. I don't condone it. We're in a territory where we're trying to get respect into the game. We're trying to get respect into officials. And these managers, we want them to be emotional. We want them to be invested. But there is a balance between being responsibly invested and irresponsibly unaccountable. And they're falling the wrong side of the line. These guys are on 12, 13 million pounds a year. They are able to control themselves. There is an element of unnecessary histrionics in the moment where, and by the way, VAR doesn't help itself. You know, when we talk about GDS, goal detection system, sometimes the old moniker of goal disallowance system seems to be the focus, because why does it take 4 minutes?
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't help itself.
I agree.
It creates a temperature of increased agitation. But that does not give people an excuse to behave the way that Conte behaved yesterday. It's ridiculous. The reasons why his team need to go to Marseille and get a result is because in previous games they've not been good enough. They've stunk the place out. They've given away games and goals in the last couple of minutes away to the same side when they should have been defending more robustly, or at least put themselves in a way of winning games.
Yeah.
So if he sits there and has the outrageous perspective that if they don't qualify next week because of their own actions next week, someone else has got to be made accountable for it, it's preposterous. And then he starts calling upon the management of Tottenham Hotspur to be able to go out and support his position and to support him. He can't be, well, shut your mouth then. No one's asking you to go to the ridiculous extremes that you've gone to. First and foremost, whether you like it or you don't like it, the goal was legitimately disallowed.
Yeah.
Second of all,
And that's key.
it's because of people like you endlessly criticising referees that they brought VAR in the first place to be able to give referees a call. Now what you're doing is you're using anything to deflect from the fact that ultimately your side's contribution over, and it's probably born out of a lot of frustration. They were crap against Man United. They weren't much better against Newcastle. And here's the third cab off the rank. The exasperation of not being able to get an outcome on their first half performance they most certainly did not deserve.
Yeah.
Second half they were better. But surely to God your team starts in the first whistle, not the 46th. So I'll make your mind up. Last week you were slaughtering somebody for having 7 jobs. You're a hypocrite. Yes, you did. You turned around and said, that's not much of a model for someone to employ. So I'm an owner. So I don't know which person I'm talking to. The reason why I have to interrupt you every now and again, because I can't allow you to pollute the airways with nonsense.
You cannot keep throwing this nonsense out there. Let me.
Not
who was I
nonsense.
talking about? 7 jobs. Who was I talking about?
You were talking about
Roberto
Roberto
De
De
Zerbi.
Zerbi.
I was talking about the Brighton manager.
Yes.
When we had the chief executive on, and I said 7 jobs in
We
9
found out
years.
you had 8.
7 jobs. Yeah, but I've managed for 20 years.
Yeah, but 5 of them were lost about a year and a half.
No,
Each
that's
one.
nonsense.
We'll
That's
go back and
nonsense.
look at it again. We did it the other day.
You rely
How
too
many
much.
times are you saying?
Excuse me. He relies too much on Wikipedia.
I don't.
But I rely on my brain, which I've been in football all my life.
You didn't know how many jobs you had.
And I understand.
You asked me how many jobs you had.
I had 8 jobs.
Okay.
in 20 years.
In 20 years.
11 trophies in 3 different countries.
You did, and 3 of them lasted 11 years, and the other 5,
I'm
the other
quite
4
hap-
lasted
I'm quite
7.
happy with my. Yeah, I'd love to be more
Yeah,
successful.
but you're
But
sending out
I'm looking
mixed
at-
messages.
I was a big player. Stephen Garrett's a big player. He's finding it really difficult.
But you
Well, I'm
just
saying,
criticised Gerrard. You say go down the Ranieri route, right? But 2 weeks ago, don't get all huffy and puffy because you can't have your say. 2 weeks ago, you said it's a bad look for an owner to look at a guy that's had X amount of jobs. Now you're advocating for it.
No,
Do you know
I'm-
whether you're Arthur or Martha?
no,
Make the
if
mind
you
up.
listen to what I'm saying, because you're not very good at listening, and that's
I do
you know,
listen,
if
but I
somebody
can
talks more than
disseminate
you
little.
listen, you're not going to learn very much going forward.
Tell me.
Now you're not too late to learn. How old are
Okay,
you?
a lot younger than you. Pathetic. I mean, a government that's indulging in self-harm and implosion being run by the media, by all means, don't reduce tax to the top end. That was nonsense. But corporation tax and things that will drive the economy, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not about unpriced pay cuts, it's about the government being run by the media. And Liz Truss is the joke. Tragically,
The government's been run by the media.
they are being run by a reaction to media, to social media, rather than having the courage. If you're going to go strong. You're supposed to be a leader. This is about leadership.
How long will this?
She didn't need the media to tell her to do that.
No, but she's reacting to circumstances, and she's not reacting to the reality of, okay, you need to change your mind. You've made decisions. You're going to make these decisions rather than make decisions based upon party donors that are going to give you fighting funds to win elections. Make decisions in the third place that are beneficial to the country, and if you then make those decisions, stick with them and own them and drive them forward. Not over 4 weeks of consistent media pressure about what, when, how, and why. It's laughable. You move into the territory you almost want to say, I tell you what, something I've never thought I'd hear myself say, call a general election because you don't deserve to be in power anymore.
Well, how long will she last?
Well, it's difficult to say why she's not going to continue to last because you're in a situation where how do you
That's the
take
next
her
step.
out? How do you take her out now? The Tories have elected her for a variety of reasons, and some can be controversial, some can be uncontroversial. And you've now got a situation where she's got 2 years to stabilise the country, build a momentum, and to give herself an opportunity to put the Tories. They've been in power for too long now. I mean, I voted Tory and I voted Labour, but everything comes to an end, and this government are all over the place. There's no leadership. There's no courage, there's no backbone, there's no thinking, there's no in touch with the reality of what people need. They're away with themselves because a lot of them are career politicians that haven't had enough real world experience in the last 15 years to understand what's really needed. And all they're doing is operating in a self-serving, self-perpetuating nonsense mode that helps nobody. It's awful.
If the media pushed her to call a general election then, and she calls one, you would come out and say, "Oh, that was the media pushing her." In other words, you'd be deceived.
Yeah, I would say you've got to lead.
Your own
You've got to
argument.
lead. You've got to lead. You haven't got to. You've got to
Nothing
lead.
to do with the media.
No, it is to do with pressure, and it's to do with your response to it.
What's with the pressure?
And I agree with that. But if you haven't got leaders, the challenge is the media, like they used to want to do, to pick the England manager of the football team.
Right.
Pick the team. Now they want to. Now they believe
go.
the Beck
27
Whitbys and the
minutes.
Ken Burleys and ghastly people like that believe they can create this amount of pressure on the government that they're so weak that they'll fall over backwards. Now, of course, you're absolutely right. But the media, whether you like it or not, and sometimes I don't, is so influenced. It's such a big influence that you've got to be a really strong
So
leader.
you need a robust media. They need a
Simon, can
robust
you
media.
educate us then on this? So the Constitution, can they now overthrow it?
No.
Not really, no.
They can't do that.
They can't have a leadership challenge because they just had one. They
Yes,
just
but
proposed
can't.
a leader, so they can't move another leader out for 12 months.
Are you sure?
Technically, no, technically can't. The 22 committee can bring forward a motion to change the position of it all, but bottom line is, we've got what we've got. But it's preposterous. It's so weak, and at a time when you need strength, it's so disappointing.
You must really regret falling over yourself to speak to Jacob Rees-Mogg the other day when he was in there.
I didn't fall over myself to meet,
You did.
you
found yourself a desk,
weasel.
and
I said
and
to
you
this-
fell in amongst some of the bin.
But what I like about him, insofar as I like him of him, is that he will at least answer questions. He'll go on to people.
Now you're getting into the realms of ludicrous.
No, he'll go on to people like James O'Brien, who are professional contrarians, and at least have an argument from a different point of view and front up to it. You might not like his opinion, might not like his policies,
that's what-
but
that's
so
what they
many
all
of these
should be
guys,
doing.
so many of these guys do not answer a question, do not have an answer, and do not have any substance, and that's what's running our country. And there'll be consequence.
He
and
was
there'll
sent
be- Fine, that's my point. When you behave that way, you get sent off. I remember years ago watching him on the touchline when he was a Blackburn manager. I don't think I've seen anybody go at an official like I saw him when we played Blackburn at home in my first year. But the bottom line is, you kind of half want it, but you want the balance to be right. But that does not conflate to somebody walking up, a manager screaming at an official, getting sent off for consequence and all that goes with that, doesn't conflate with somebody walking up to the referee and punching his face in. We can make it that way. We can say this is the beginning of the journey, but people have to be responsible for their individual behaviour. I know it's not the greatest look, and I don't want it either. I want managers to calm themselves down at times. But you are right to turn around and say that there is a way of behaving and an expectation on a professional game to behave in a way that is broadly akin with people looking at it and saying, but there is a big stretch to go. Jurgen Klopp, in a 50,000 seater stadium, in the intensity of battle, loses his mind for 30 seconds and goes overboard and gets consequence for it, then translate to some moron bashing a referee up on the pitch. Now, we can make that translation and we can link it and we can say the professional game has a greater obligation to do better, or we can say that individual is a disgrace and should be in prison. And also, we should up our standards a little bit and we should look at the culture of how managers are able to criticise referees and look at it a little bit more deeply and look at what we're trying to achieve for refereeing, because the referee, whether we like it or we don't, unless we want artificial intelligence running our games, is an integral part of the game, and they are entitled to a bit more respect.
The official relationship is well a societal one, and I took the stance in the meetings that I attended that the police were a paid resource. So subsequently, I wanted the police to honour their responsibilities for the money that I was paying, and there was often a silence in the room. David Bernard was at Wimbledon at the time, and he was the chief officer for Wimbledon, moved on to Chelsea. I'm not sure they're still there now, Chelsea, but he was always in the camp that the police must be treated with reverence, and we must give them what they want and bow to what they think they can dictate. And I'd be no, sod off, no. They're a paid resource. I respect the police. The policing by consent is something I value, but this is a commercial relationship. And I had many an argument with them, whether it was Brighton or, let's say, Millwall. And Millwall wanted to bring 5,000 or 6,000 fans. I wanted to give them a stand, and they'd be like, "No, we're not happy with that." And I'd go, "Well, that's fantastic. I recognise your unhappiness, but this is do. So police it and send me the bill." And the conversation would go that way.
What was the bill?
Or whatever it was at the time, depends upon, we're talking about 10 years ago now, so we're talking about policing of a certain level, could be 20, 30,000 a game, probably up to 70, 80,000 a game, probably even more now, given the nature of the requirements.
So did you get away? Or
Yes,
was
I
it
did.
this horse trade you were
Yes, I
talking
did.
about?
And let me be clear with your man here that thinks he's got a class action or thinks he's got an action. First of all, you don't. Second of all, your issue is with your football club, because this decision was made between the football clubs. The police will use influence and use pressure and suggest that they're going to have their way, but they don't get to do it on their own in isolation.
Right.
So Chelsea have got a history of not particularly valuing fans, haven't they? By the very nature of they weren't prepared to take their fans, or wanted Middlesbrough in the FA Cup to play behind closed doors last year. So with that in mind, I would suspect that Chelsea didn't bat too hard for Man United fans. And if Man United are prepared to accept what Chelsea have forced upon them because of their relationship with the Met, because Man United don't have a relationship with the Met, because they're in Manchester, Chelsea have that relationship. So with that in mind, perhaps they should ask their football club that was prepared to accept on their behalf a reduction of 600 tickets for losses that anyone's incurred as a result of it.
There's not much more that Manchester United can do, is there?
They can reimburse their fans.
game.
No, they can, if they want.
Why should they reimburse their
Because they
fans?
can sit there and they can force Chelsea into situations. Listen, if the old bill started with 1,500 fans and it was horse trade up to 2,300, people were negotiating. So the negotiation from my side, if I was Man United, wanted to support my fans, was here's my negotiation: 2,994. That's my negotiation. Back to this game has been moved back and forward to accommodate new Chelsea and your requirements,
Right.
and your European Cup requirements,
Right.
not ours.
Right.
So with that in mind, we value our fans. So we want the full allocation that you sold to us in good faith, and get on with it and
Yeah.
manage your relationship with the Metropolitan Police.
So, and you're telling me that when you were the owner of Palace, you would have the away club dictating to you what the terms were?
I would say in this. No, I wouldn't. I would push back about if I was
Well,
Chelsea.
exactly.
If I
Well,
was
yeah,
Chelsea,
but-
but it's a battle. So what do? You need a Mexican standoff. Well, basically, no, we're not going to refund our fans. We're sending 3,000 fans. What are you going to do about it? Well, hopefully, no, and hopefully he'll suffer the consequences for his behaviour.
Yeah.
Because we're getting to a point now where it's enough now, and I'm not suggesting that referees should be given a pass. I'm not suggesting that the
I
state
said
of
from the
punishment
head,
may
I
change.
just saying,
I'm suggesting that these bloody
Manchester
managers
here.
should behave themselves.
Let me
Yeah,
show you
they are
where
put
you
at a
need
level
to
of great
come.
authority. They want their players to
Guys.
behave themselves. Why in God's name shouldn't they start that particular?
It's
thing?
right
It sends
here.
out a message. It affects people. It
That's the
impacts
head
upon them.
actors.
It brings people into a situation
067
where they have
LR
consequence for their
168
actions.
Stamford
30
Central,
grand
Ashton,
falls out of his
Manchester.
pocket on the way to the bleeding game.
Our telephone number for any orders is 077 077 24158. 077 077
He
24158.
should be taken out of
Open
the
Monday
role
to
that he's in
Saturday,
for a period of
girls.
time and understood. If you speed repeatedly, you have to go for and get a speeding fine. You have to go and do a